Wait, what? I said I'm making you my personal assistant, he repeated in his deep, smooth voice. I had heard him, but the words made no more sense to me than they had the first time. When Meisha told me that Mr. Dracos had called me in, I wanted to run in the opposite direction. Not because I hate it here, but because I did something yesterday that put my entire career in jeopardy. That is, if Mr. Dracos decides to keep me alive. So, with dread, I got up, wished it was something about the pending file on my desk, and made my way to his rich mahogany office. But never, in my wildest dream, had I imagined him to say something like this. Me, his personal assistant? The one job everyone in this company coveted. Hell, I think more than 70% of the city's population wants the job. Eros. His commanding voice pulled me straight back from my thoughts, without failing to send chills down my spine. Yes, sir, I stammered like always. What do you think? He asked tentatively. I always found it difficult to look straight at him. I mean, how could anyone look at those steely gray eyes, as sharp as claws, as cold as ice? He had a very refined personality, a very intimidating aura, and something about him was just so hot. Before I could answer, he got up and came very close to me. He stopped when he was just a breath away, his gray eyes locking into mine. I've noticed something about you, he said, his voice so deep it practically rumbled through the room. You're not like the others here. You have potential. My heart was pounding in my chest. My brain was going haywire, trying to figure out what was happening. Was he complimenting me? Or was there something more? You're smart, Eros, he continued, his eyes not leaving mine for a second. And you know how to get things done. But I think you've been hiding in the background. Don't you think it's time to step forward? His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. I could feel the heat from his body, and the tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I don't know what to say, sir, I stammered, my cheeks flushing under his intense gaze. I'm honored, of course, but why me? Cyrus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was slow, calculated, almost predatory. His eyes gleamed as he leaned in, his voice dropping even lower. Because I want someone I can trust. Someone I can rely on. His words were innocent enough, but the way he said them, God, it was like there was an entirely different conversation happening beneath the surface. It was hard to breathe with him standing this close, his eyes flicking between my lips and my eyes. And Eros? He paused, his hand so close to brushing my arm. I think we could work well together. Very well. The way he said that sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt my heart skip a beat. Was he seriously flirting with me right now? My boss, Cyrus Dracos, was implying something that could blow up my entire life. And worse, I wasn't sure I hated it. I'm not sure I understand, sir, I managed to say, my voice shaky. He smiled again, leaning in closer. I think you understand perfectly, Eros. Cyrus's hand brushed lightly against my arm, just for a second, but it was enough to make me freeze. I can make your life here very comfortable, he said softly, his eyes locking onto mine. If you're willing to make a few adjustments. Adjustments? What the hell did that even mean? My heart was racing now, pounding in my chest. I knew I should say something, draw a line, anything. But I was stuck. It wasn't just that he was my boss, or that he was older, or that I had no idea what he really wanted. It was that, standing this close to him, I realized just how magnetic he was. Dangerous, but magnetic. I felt his breath on my skin, and for a second, I thought he might actually kiss me. I didn't know if I'd pull away, or lean in. Cyrus's lips curved into that same slow, deliberate smile. Think about it, he whispered, his voice barely audible now, and then, just like that, he waved his hand, dismissing me. I nodded, barely able to form words, and turned to leave, feeling like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. As I stepped out of his office, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Atlas. Later that evening. Atlas's apartment was fancy, but then again, everything about him screamed success. The city lights flickered through the massive windows, but I hardly saw them. All I could focus on was Atlas, as he stood there, tall, muscular, and way too hot for his own good. His dark hair was still messy, his green eyes locked onto mine, and that teasing smirk made my heart race. "You look tense," Atlas said, stepping closer, his deep voice like a purr. I let out a nervous laugh, running a hand through my curls. "Do I? Maybe I'm just tired from work," I admitted, trying to play it cool. My mind, though, it was still stuck on Cyrus, my boss who had flirted with me just hours ago. And now, here I was in Atlas's apartment, his biggest business rival, about to... Oh well, whatever. I wasn't about to stop. Atlas raised an eyebrow. "Let me help you with that." Before I knew it, the space between us vanished. His hands were on my waist, pulling me in, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was rough, needy, like we'd both been waiting for this. I kissed him back just as hard, my hands exploring the firm muscles beneath his shirt. Atlas was everything I wanted right now. Hot, intense, and making me forget every damn thing. Except for that little nagging voice. What if Cyrus finds out? I pushed the thought aside, letting Atlas back me toward the couch. His hands were everywhere, and the way he kissed me made my skin tingle. He pushed me down onto the cushions, his body hovering over mine, hands under my shirt, lips teasing my neck. "You okay?" he asked, lips barely above my collarbone. I nodded, breathless. "Yeah, just..." He chuckled, his fingers teasing at the waistband of my jeans. I couldn't help the way my body reacted to him. Every touch, every kiss was making it impossible to think straight. I kissed him back, pulling his shirt up, craving more. But no matter how good it felt, that nagging thought wouldn't go away. What if Cyrus finds out? I tried to shake it off as Atlas kissed me harder, but I knew this wasn't just casual. I was tangled up in something way bigger. But as Atlas's hands moved all over me, I let myself get lost in him. I'd deal with the rest later. 3 weeks later. Sitting across from Cyrus Dracos at a fancy restaurant wasn't how I pictured spending my day. This wasn't just a quick lunch, it was one of those long, formal business meals with too many utensils and way too much formality, one I couldn't say no to no matter how much I tried to avoid. Though I'm not sure I really tried that hard. So here I was, sitting in front of Cyrus, who casually sipping his wine, looking way too good for a guy his age. "Try the steak, Eros. You won't regret it," Cyrus said with that smooth, confident smile. His voice had a way of turning a simple suggestion into something that felt like a command. "Sure, I'll give it a go," I said, trying to hide how nervous I felt. "So," he said, leaning back a little, his eyes fixed on me. "How are you finding things at your new position? Settling in well?" "Yeah, things have been good," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I'm learning a lot." Cyrus nodded like he expected me to say that. "Good. You've been impressive, Eros. I'm not surprised." That caught me off guard. "Thanks. I try to keep up." His gaze lingered on me a little longer than it should have. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, voice dropping slightly. "Why haven't we had a chance to get to know each other better outside of work?" I nearly choked on my water. Was he flirting again? "I've just been focused on my work," I said quickly, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Keeping busy." Cyrus chuckled like he knew exactly what he was doing. "Of course. But all work and no play isn't good for you, Eros. You got to enjoy life a little." "Yeah, you're probably right." I smiled awkwardly, feeling the tension rising. This was definitely not how I thought lunch was going to go. Just when I was about to change the subject, Cyrus leaned in a bit. "It's nice to have someone to talk to," he said, his tone softer now. "I don't get the chance to do this often." That caught me off guard. "Really? I think someone like you would be surrounded by people." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Surrounded, sure. But that doesn't mean I'm close to any of them." There was something vulnerable in his voice, something I didn't expect. Before I could respond, he sighed and looked out the window. "I have a son, you know," he said quietly. I blinked. I didn't know that. Yeah, we used to be close, but things have been strained. His voice had this sadness to it that I wasn't used to hearing from him. I'm sorry, I said softly. Do you guys talk at all? Not as much as I'd like, Cyrus admitted, a sad smile tugging at his lips. But I miss him. There was a silence between us, heavy with something deeper. Cyrus Dracos, the confident, powerful man I worked for, had a softer side. And somehow, I felt like I was getting pulled into something way more complicated than I signed up for. Later that night, Atlas's apartment had become a familiar place for me. I've been spending a lot of time there lately, probably more than I should have, but there was something about being with him that made everything else fade away. Things between us were complicated, but we didn't talk about it. Usually we just fall into each other, letting the heat of the moment take over. Tonight felt different though. We had dinner, nothing fancy, just some takeout. Now we were lying in bed, side by side, the room dimly lit by a lamp. Atlas was quiet, staring up at the ceiling, lost in thought. I rolled onto my side, leaning on one elbow to get a better look at him. What's going on in that head of yours? Atlas turned to me, his expression softening a bit. Just thinking, I smiled, trying to lighten the mood. That's dangerous. He chuckled, but the sound was hollow, his eyes not quite matching the laugh. I frowned, sensing he was holding something back. You know you can talk to me, right? He sighed, running a hand through his dark, messy hair. For a second, I thought he'd brush it off like he usually did. But then he spoke, his voice rough, like he wasn't used to talking about this stuff. I've been thinking about us. My heart skipped a beat. What about us? He looked at me, his green eyes sharp in the dim light. I like you, Eros. More than I thought I would. His honesty threw me off guard. We hadn't really talked about where this was going. I like you too, Atlas, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled, but it looked sad. You remind me of someone. I raised an eyebrow, confused. Who? After a pause, he sighed. My mom. I stared at him, surprised. Your mom? Atlas nodded. She had golden curls like yours. Blue eyes, freckles. He said while his hand softly traced all of my features. His voice was soft as he spoke, and I could tell he was seeing someone else in his mind. You look a lot like her. I didn't know what to say. He never mentioned his mom before, and I didn't know much about his family. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. She died when I was young, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I was just a kid. One minute she was there, and then she wasn't. A pang of sympathy hit me hard. I'm so sorry, Atlas. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. I lost her because of my father. I sat up a little, confused. What do you mean? Atlas's jaw clenched, his sadness turning into something darker. He's the reason she's gone. I don't want to talk about it. His fists clenched at his sides, and I could see how much this was tearing him up inside. He was holding back something big, but before I could push, he shook his head like he couldn't go on. It doesn't matter. I reached out, resting a hand on his arm. Atlas, you don't have to say anything if you're not ready. But I'm here, if you need me. For a moment he didn't say anything. Then, with a shaky breath, he looked at me, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Please don't leave me, Eros, he whispered. I don't think I can handle losing someone else. His words hit me hard. Before I could even respond, Atlas pulled me into a tight hug, burying his face in my neck. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close as I felt the tension in his body slowly ease up. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered, rubbing his back gently. I didn't know the whole story about his mom or what his father had done, but I could feel how deep the pain went. The way he held on to me, like I was his lifeline, broke my heart. We stayed like that for a while, just holding each other in the quiet room. His breathing eventually slowed, and I realized he was falling asleep in my arms. I shifted a little, careful not to wake him, but even in his sleep, he didn't let go of me completely. It was like he was afraid I'd disappear if he did. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I didn't know what I'd gotten myself into with Atlas. He was carrying so much pain, and I wasn't sure if I could help. But I knew one thing. I didn't want to leave him. Atlas needed someone, and maybe for now, that someone was me. As he slept, I tightened my arms around him, resting my neck against his head. I couldn't promise I'd always be there, but for tonight, I could be the one thing he didn't have to worry about losing. And for now, Maybe that was enough. The next morning. Morning light seeped through the curtains. Atlas was still asleep beside me, his arm draped lazily across my chest. Last night had been intense. He opened up more than ever, but I knew there was still a lot he wasn't telling me. My thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell ringing. It was early. Way too early for visitors. I slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake Atlas. Grabbing some pants and a shirt, I made my way to the door, annoyed by the insistent ringing. I unlocked it, ready to tell off whoever it was, but froze when I saw him. Cyrus, my boss, standing there in a sharp suit, looking every bit as polished as always. But what the hell was he doing here? Cyrus? I barely managed to say, my mind racing. His eyes swept over me, rumpled clothes, messy hair, and his expression turned cold. Eros? What are you doing here? Before I could answer, I heard Atlas behind me, his voice still groggy from sleep. Eros? Who's at the door? I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. Atlas walked down the hall, shirtless and half asleep. Then he saw who was at the door. Everything went still. Who shows up at their business rival's house so early in the morning? God, I was gonna get fired. Worse, sued. However, things took a completely different turn as Atlas's confused expression turned to shock. He looked at Cyrus, then back at me. Dad? Atlas said, his voice filled with disbelief. The word hung in the air like a slap, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Wait, what? Atlas and Cyrus were father and son? My boss was Atlas's father. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I just thought, no, they were business rivals, the biggest competitors of each other. But this? Cyrus's gaze snapped back to me, his jaw tightening. You've been sleeping with my son? He demanded, his voice sharp, cutting through the thick air. I didn't know what to say. My head was spinning, the shock of it all crashing down on me. I didn't know. Atlas's voice cut through mine, his eyes wide with disbelief as he looked between me and Cyrus. You know my dad? He asked, his voice rising in anger. I didn't know, I said quickly, holding up my hands. Atlas, I swear I didn't know he was your dad. Atlas's face hardened, his shock giving way to anger. What the hell is going on, Eros? Cyrus stepped forward, his expression unreadable, but there was a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I came to see you, Atlas, he said, his voice softer now, but still intense. Last night, at dinner, you suggested that I reach out to my son. That maybe we could... He was addressing me, but was cut off by Atlas. You had dinner with him? His voice sharp and incredulous. You've been spending time with my dad? I didn't know, I repeated, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea you two were related. Atlas's jaw clenched, and he turned on Cyrus, his eyes burning with anger. You came here because of him? Cyrus hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I thought... Of course you did, Atlas snapped, his voice filled with venom. Because you can't help yourself, can you? You always have to take everything from me. Cyrus's face fell, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe? But then Atlas stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. Stay away from Eros. He has nothing to do with you. Atlas, I'm just trying to... Don't you dare! Atlas growled, his voice dangerously low. Don't you pretend like you're trying to help me. You never cared about me. You only care about yourself. You took away the one person I loved. Now you're trying to take Eros from me too. Cyrus flinched, but he didn't back down. I'm not trying to take him from you. I didn't know you two were... involved. That's not the point, Atlas snapped, his eyes blazing. You ruined everything. Just like you ruined Mom. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Cyrus's face went pale, the mention of Atlas's mother hitting him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to say something, but Atlas didn't give him the chance. She killed herself because of you, Atlas spat, his voice shaking with rage. Because you came out publicly and embarrassed her. You didn't care what it would do to her. You didn't care about how heartbroken she was. You only cared about your reputation, about saving your name. Cyrus's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw real pain in his eyes. Atlas. No, Atlas cut him off, his voice cracking. I don't want to hear it. You destroyed her, and now you want to destroy me too. Cyrus took a step back, his shoulders slumping. He looked at Atlas, then at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Sorrow? I never wanted to hurt you, he said quietly. Atlas stood there, chest heaving with anger, fists clenched. He didn't say a word as Cyrus nodded and walked away, leaving the door open behind him. The tension was suffocating, and I didn't know what to do or say. Finally, Atlas turned to me, his eyes burning. "How could you do this to me?" he demanded, his voice filled with hurt and rage. I felt caught in the middle of something way bigger than I ever realized. "I didn't know," I said again, my voice small. "Atlas, I swear, I didn't know." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "You have no idea what that man has done to me, to my family. You've been around him this whole time, and you didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't know," I said, my heart pounding. "Atlas, please." "Just go," he said, his voice cold and distant now. I can't deal with this right now." I opened my mouth to say something, to try and fix it, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He didn't want me there. Not now, maybe not ever. Without another word, I grabbed my things. Next day, I walked into Cyrus's office, feeling like I was about to take the biggest step of my life. I had my resignation letter in hand, and I was ready to end it all. Yesterday morning had turned my world upside down, and I couldn't stay here anymore. Cyrus was buried in paperwork as usual, but he looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. "Morning, Eros. What can I do for you?" "Morning, Cyrus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to resign." I handed him the envelope, watching as he took it and skimmed over the contents. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, a mix of curiosity and concern in his gaze. "Resigning? May I ask why?" I took a deep breath. "I didn't expect you to be Atlas's father, and after everything that happened, I just can't work here anymore." Cyrus's eyes shot up slightly, but he didn't say anything. So I continued. "I'm not sure I can work here knowing what I know." Cyrus's face remained calm, but there was something guarded in his eyes. "And what exactly do you think you know?" "That you're Atlas's father, and..." I started, but my voice trailed off. "And that whatever happened with him and his mom..." He cut me off with a sharp nod. "You're blaming me for things I may not have done?" I felt a pang of confusion. "What do you mean you may not have done?" Cyrus leaned back in his chair. "I understand you're upset, but you're making assumptions based on limited information. I'm not going to accept your resignation." "What?" I blinked, taken aback. "But I..." "That's all." And with his usual wave of a hand, he dismissed me. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say or do. Cyrus should have fired me. Instead, he rejected my resignation. Why? I felt a mix of frustration and bewilderment. What exactly had Cyrus done, if anything? Was he really at fault? Or was there more to the story? "Fine," I said finally, turning on my heel and walking out. As I left the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off, but I had no idea what. 2 weeks later, the days after the dramatic showdown were a blur of confusion. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get things out of my head. The whole thing was like a mystery to me, calling out to me. As much as I didn't want to be stuck in this whole father-son dynamic, I was not able to keep it out of my head. Solving it seemed like the only way to calm my mind. So I started researching about it. Considering how big their family name was, it wasn't hard to find hundreds of articles and blogs revolving around them. Truly, the scandal was huge. The news that Cyrus came out as gay was a major scandal at the time, but the situation got even worse the very next day. His wife, Ophelia, died in what was reported as an accident. She fell from the roof of their house. Different versions of what happened. Some claimed Cyrus's coming out had led to a confrontation that ended tragically. Others said it was just a horrible accident, with the stress of the situation causing everything to spiral out of control. As I read through all these stories, it became clear how messy and painful the situation was. The scandal had clearly damaged Cyrus's reputation with Atlas. The public had turned Cyrus into a villain for some, while others saw him as a victim. Atlas was deeply affected by everything that had happened. After struggling for so long to find it, I could barely find anything. I can understand why Atlas blamed Cyrus for Ophelia's death, but then didn't Cyrus mention something about things not being the way they seem? A week later. "What do you want, Eros?" he asked, his voice cold. "I need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About everything that happened." With no more clues from anywhere else, I had to come visit Atlas. Listen to what he knows and believe. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I needed to find answers for my own sanity, and maybe for both Atlas and Cyrus. He hesitated, then stepped aside, letting me in. We sat in the living room, the tension between us almost palpable. I took a deep breath. Atlas, I really want to understand. What's going on with you and your dad? Please. Atlas looked away, his jaw tightening. It's a long story. I've got time, I said softly. Please. He finally nodded, rubbing his face in frustration. All right. But you might not like what you hear. Atlas took a deep breath, clearly struggling with the weight of his memories. It all started when I was about 15. I was watching TV at a friend's place, and suddenly there was my dad on the news. He came out as gay. It was everywhere. Big headlines, lots of drama. He paused, clearly reliving the moment. I remember feeling so confused and angry. I didn't understand why he would do something so public, so messy. I didn't have time to process it, though. I just wanted to see my mom. Atlas rubbed his face, the frustration evident. I rushed home, trying to find her. I remember arriving at the house, and the scene was chaotic. People were everywhere. And then, he hesitated, his eyes distant. I saw her. She was on the roof. I saw her jump, fall, crash on the ground to death. I'm so sorry, I whispered as he fought back the tears in his eyes. She was the strongest woman I knew. What other than my father's betrayal could have pushed her to do something like this? He broke down. I hugged him hard, holding him, comforting him as his body shook. We sat there like that for a while, till he calmed down. I'm sorry, he whispered. What for? For that day. I just saw him, and it brought all the memories back. It's not your fault you work for him. I know you would never if you had known the truth. Please forgive me. I love you, he said in a breath. Shh, it's all right. I understand. I reassured him, but my mind was stuck somewhere else. Atlas? Yeah? Did you actually see her jump? I asked cautiously, but Atlas could not reply. As it turned out, he had never seen her jump, just fall. 3 days later. I went to Atlas's house, my mind still a mess of emotions from the other day. Just as I was about to ring the doorbell, a woman came out of the house. She looked to be in her late 40s, with dark hair streaked with silver, and a kind, though slightly wary expression. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, it was like she was trying to place me, or maybe she was just taken aback by my presence. Then she quickly regained her composure and stepped closer. Hello, she said, her voice smooth and calm. I'm Iris, Atlas's aunt. I introduced myself. I'm Eros. Nice to meet you. Iris studied me closely, her gaze lingering on my face and then moving to my hair. You look so much like her, she said softly, almost to herself. I frowned. Like who? Iris's eyes flickered with something like sadness or nostalgia. Oh, never mind, she said quickly, shaking her head. It's nothing. I should be going. It was nice to meet you, Eros. She gave a polite smile and walked past me, heading toward her car. I watched her go, puzzled by her comment and her reaction. What did she mean I looked like someone? I turned back toward the house and rang the doorbell. Atlas answered a moment later, looking a bit surprised to see me already there. I jumped straight to the point. I met your aunt Iris when I arrived. She seemed surprised to see me. Atlas's expression shifted slightly. Oh, Iris. Yeah, she's been a huge part of my life since my mom passed away. She's the closest thing I have to her parent now. She was really close to my mom. I nodded, trying to piece together the connection. She said something strange, though. When she saw me, she said I looked a lot like someone. I asked her who, but she just brushed it off. Atlas's eyes softened as he looked at me. My mom. She must have met my mother. I told you, you look like her a lot. He stepped closer and pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly. You remind me so much of her. I think she saw that too. I guess it's something about your features, your hair. She used to say my mom was very special, and I suppose she sees a bit of her in you. I could see how much Iris's reaction had affected Atlas. He seemed a bit emotional, and it hit me just how much this connection meant to him. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around him too, and hugged him. I didn't know, I said softly, resting my head against his shoulder. I'm sorry if this is all... It's okay, Atlas murmured, his voice muffled. It's just... a lot sometimes. but having you here helps. The next day, I decided to visit Iris to get some clarity about Ophelia's death. For some reason, I had this nagging feeling in my gut that she knew the most about her death, so I went to see her. I walked in, saw Iris sitting at the counter table, and approached her. "Hi, Iris. Thank you so much for seeing me." She looked up, surprised to see me, but gestured for me to sit. "Of course, Eros. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone casual. "I wanted to ask you about Ophelia. I know it's a sensitive topic, but it's really important to have answers. For me, for Atlas, and maybe even Cyrus." Iris's face tensed, and she looked away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "What about her?" I went straight to the point. What really happened to her? "Ophelia was the kindest, sweetest, strongest soul I have ever met. She was beautiful, just like you. But we made a few mistakes and she was taken away from us far too soon." Iris reminisced with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Iris. Could you tell me how exactly did she die?" "The news mentioned something falling from the roof." Iris hesitated, her hands fidgeting with her coffee cup. "Yes, I did try to grab her hand. I tried to save her, but she was already gone. Fallen straight to death." I was taken aback. "You were there when she fell?" "Yes. No. I mean, I had just reached the roof when I saw her fall," she stammered through her reply. If anything, this contradiction made me even more uneasy. "But I thought you tried to grab her hand." Her face grew pale, and she looked out the window, avoiding my gaze. I might have been mistaken. It was such a shock. I don't want to relive it." I pressed on, trying to piece together the inconsistencies. "So you were on the roof when she fell, but you also mentioned trying to catch her. That seems confusing." Iris's eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and frustration. "Look, I don't want to get into it. It's too painful. I was there, but things happened so fast. It's hard to remember everything clearly." It was clear she was hiding something, and her answers were only adding to the confusion. I felt a pang of frustration, but also a deep sense of empathy for her. "I understand it's hard. I just wanted to know what happened. If you ever want to talk more about it, I'm here." She nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you, Eros. I appreciate that." I stood up, feeling like I hadn't gotten all the answers I wanted, but I also understood that Iris wasn't ready to share everything. "I'll let you go. Thanks for talking with me." As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Iris was clearly holding back, and whatever the truth was, she knew it, and maybe I somewhat figured out what it might have been. 2 days later, I made my way to Cyrus's office, determined to get some answers. I had no idea what I was gonna do. Bluff him a bit, maybe? And if my guess is correct, I'll have the answers I've been looking for so long today. When I walked in, Cyrus looked up from his desk, a mix of surprise and guarded concern crossing his face.
"Eros, what's this about?"
he asked, his voice steady, but with an edge. "I know everything," I said, cutting straight to the point. I spoke to Iris. She told me the whole story. I watched his face carefully, searching for a reaction. Cyrus's expression tightened.
"I see. And what exactly did she say?"
She told me how she tried to grab Ophelia's hand when she fell, but couldn't save her. "Why didn't you tell Atlas all this?" Cyrus leaned back.
"It's not that simple,"
he admitted slowly. I nodded, urging him to continue. Cyrus took a deep breath.
"Ophelia and I were married by our parents. It was a marriage of convenience, meant to secure our family's fortunes. We cared deeply for each other, but it was more of a platonic love. We had an open marriage, understanding that we both had other relationships. When I was caught with a boyfriend by the paparazzi, I had to come out publicly to control the damage and protect our family's reputation. Ophelia knew what was happening."
I frowned.
"Unfortunately, things got messy. Iris wanted Ophelia to come out with her, but Ophelia wasn't ready. She wanted to wait until Atlas was older. She didn't want him to go through that kind of pain again so soon. They had an argument, and in the heat of the moment, Iris accidentally pushed Ophelia, who fell from the roof."
I was shocked. Iris and Ophelia were together?
"Yes, they were in love."
"Wait, I thought you knew the truth. You tricked me." Before I could respond, Atlas burst into the room, who I specifically asked not to come inside till the very end, but I guess he couldn't control himself. His face was a mix of anger and disbelief. "Dad, is it true? Did Iris?" Cyrus looked at Atlas with pained eyes.
"No, Iris didn't kill your mother. It was a tragic accident. I know Iris blames herself, but it was a mistake. I couldn't tell you the truth then. You had just lost your mother, and you hated me. Iris was the only parent figure you had left. I didn't want to take her away too from you. I couldn't put you through so much.
Atlas's face softened, and he rushed to his father, pulling him into a tight hug.
I'm sorry, Dad. I should have understood better. I didn't know.
Cyrus hugged him back, tears in his eyes.
I'm sorry too. I should have been honest with you.
In that moment, the tension between them melted away. They stood there, holding each other, and I could see the years of hurt slowly starting to heal. As they embraced, I turned to quietly leave the room, giving them the space they needed, but was pulled into the hug by either one of them. Conclusion. They say time heals it all. Maybe that's what happened. Slowly, Atlas and Cyrus eventually found their way back to each other, putting their differences aside and merging their companies. The new venture quickly became the top company in the city. Iris apologized to both Atlas and Cyrus, and to some extent, Atlas was able to forgive her. After that, she left for Ophelia's hometown, and had been living there since. As for Cyrus, he retired, passing the reins to Atlas. It was a fresh start, and Atlas was ready for the challenge. As for me, I became the CEO's personal assistant. Only this time, it was Atlas I worked for. However, he may be my boss in the company, but he knew better than to boss his fiancée around in real life. Have you ever been stuck in a messy love triangle? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.